One thing you need to awaken to is this: temptation in our generation doesn't come in the form of terrifying demons. It often comes dressed as something familiar, something that looks completely normal. Such as the familiar restaurants like McDonald's that remain packed every day, or the face of revolutionaries like Che Guevara, still printed on t-shirts as if he were a symbol of freedom. You may not believe it, but these seemingly harmless things were actually the final trap. It was confirmed by a pastor who died, and in the moment when his soul left his body, an angel took him to a place most people don't want to believe is real: hell. And there he saw things that have left everyone who hears them trembling. An entire McDonald's system ruled by demons, and Che Guevara himself, the legendary revolutionary, imprisoned in eternal fire. What the pastor saw and heard will make it hard for you to sleep tonight. But this isn't just a story to frighten you. This is a call from God to you, to me, and to all who think they're safe. We know some will reject it, some will doubt. But if what he saw is true, then our silence today could mean the destruction of souls tomorrow. Before we begin, comment Amen with your name and city. We will pray for you. And for those who've supported this channel through super thanks, know this: God sees it. You're not just helping a video, you're planting a seed of faith into your own life. Now, listen to the testimony of this pastor, and don't treat this as a distant story. Because one day, each of us will stand before the eternal judge. My name is Gabriel Mendoza. I am a humble pastor serving a small evangelical community in South America. For years, I've dedicated my life to preaching the gospel, comforting the broken, and shepherding the faithful. Yet nothing in my ministry, not even the most intense moments of prayer or spiritual warfare, could have prepared me for what I'm about to share with you. This is not just a vision. It is a testimony. And it is the most terrifying and urgent truth I have ever witnessed. With me on this journey was Sister Lourdes Esperanza, a woman known throughout our region as a pillar of prayer. Though she has no title, no pulpit, and no platform, her faith moves mountains. She is a widow, quiet in spirit, but mighty in the Lord. For 3 days and 3 nights, she and I committed ourselves to a time of fasting and intercession. We went out to a sacred patch of land just beyond the village, where an ancient apple tree stands, twisted by time, yet rooted like an altar in the earth. Beneath that tree we prayed without ceasing. We ate nothing. We drank only water. The sun rose and fell 3 times as we wept for the state of the world, for the lukewarm church, and for the souls lost to sin. By the 3rd afternoon, my body was weak, more than weak. I could barely kneel. My breath grew shallow, my vision blurred. And then, without warning, I collapsed at the base of the tree. Sister Lourdes later told me I stopped breathing. My pulse faded. She screamed for help, but we were far from the village. There was no one, no doctor, no ambulance, just her hands gripping mine and her voice crying out to heaven. But what she could not see was what happened next. In those moments of clinical death, I found myself outside of my body. My eyes were still closed, yet I could see everything. I hovered just above the earth, weightless, no longer bound by pain or fatigue. I turned and saw my own body lying motionless, my skin pale, my lips slightly parted. Sister Lourdes knelt over me, sobbing, her voice cracking as she prayed. Then came the light. It wasn't sunlight. It wasn't fire. It was a living radiance, pure and holy, brighter than anything on earth, but it did not blind me. It welcomed me. From within the light stepped a figure tall, robed in glory, shining with authority. An angel of the Lord. His presence commanded awe, yet radiated peace. His eyes held eternity in them. He spoke my name. Gabriel, Lourdes, follow me. His voice echoed through my being, not through my ears, but through my soul. At that moment I realized that Sister Lourdes' spirit had also left her body. We stood side by side, no longer in the physical realm, but in a spiritual state, alert, fully conscious, and utterly at the mercy of something far greater than ourselves. We followed the angel, who led us toward what looked like a swirling tunnel of darkness. The entrance was wide and ominous, like the mouth of a great beast. I hesitated. Everything in me recoiled from it, but the angel turned and said, "Do not fear. What you are about to see must be testified." Many will perish if this warning is not heard. We stepped forward. The air grew thick, the light behind us fading, and soon we were walking through a tunnel of deep shadow. Yet there was no confusion in our minds. We were being taken to a place very real, very alive, and very horrifying. What we witnessed in the minutes that followed would scar our memories and shake our understanding of eternity. The images are not symbolic. They are not metaphors. They are realities unfiltered, undisguised, and revealed for the sake of your soul and mine. This was not a dream. It was hell. And what I saw there, what we saw, has haunted me every day since. It was in that realm of torment that we came face to face with the truth about gluttony, about pride, about rebellion. We saw souls eternally condemned. We walked through horrors disguised as pleasure. And yes, we saw places and people we never expected among them, the twisted image of a McDonald's restaurant in hell, and the tormented soul of the Argentine revolutionary known to the world as Che Guevara. I do not share this lightly, but I must speak, because someone needs to hear this, and someone must escape before it is too late. As we followed the angel deeper into the tunnel, the dim light behind us faded until all we could see was the radiant glow emanating from his form. I am still reeling from the moment our spirits left our bodies and found it difficult to comprehend where we were being taken, but every step forward confirmed this was no dream, no symbol, but a journey into a realm more real and terrifying than anything on earth. Suddenly the tunnel widened and the path beneath our feet leveled out. What rose before us froze me in place. A colossal gate stood in the center of an immense chasm, its monstrous size stretching into a blood-red sky with no discernible end. Its iron surface was blackened, scorched, and pitted with jagged scars, as if the very fires of judgment had licked its frame for centuries. Barbs, hooks, and chains clung to its edges like the torn remnants of past torment. The ground trembled beneath us as a low groan rose from the gate, an ancient, dreadful creak that sounded less mechanical and more like the wail of 10,000 souls crying out in despair. Sister Lourdes, standing to my right, instinctively clutched my arm. Her eyes were wide with dread, and her breath came in short, fearful bursts. The air around us thickened, heavy with an unholy stench that made my eyes burn and my lungs tighten, a sickening mix of sulfur, smoke, and rotting flesh. From the cracks in the gate seeped a deep red glow, like the pulsing embers of a smoldering volcano, casting long, shifting shadows that danced like wraiths ready to devour. Screams, faint at first but unmistakable, cries of pain, horror, hopelessness. Some shrieked in rage, others moaned in torment, and some begged for mercy, for relief, for death. The sound drilled into my chest, clawing at my soul. The angel stepped forward, his radiance steady, though a grave sorrow rested on his countenance. He turned to us and said in a voice that echoed across the chasm, "This is the threshold of hell. What you are about to see must be witnessed. It is not punishment for your faith, but a revelation meant to awaken many." His eyes met mine. "You must not look away." My knees trembled. I whispered a prayer under my breath, "Lord, cover us with your strength." And then, with a groan that shook the ground and rattled my bones, the gates opened. They didn't swing like ordinary doors. They cracked apart, slowly, like the jaws of some ancient beast unsealing after centuries of slumber. A wave of heat rushed out, hotter than any furnace, and yet it carried not only temperature but a spiritual weight. It pressed against my mind, against my heart. It was despair made tangible. We stepped through. The world beyond the gate was not one of fire and brimstone alone. It was layered in horror. A tunnel of jagged stone stretched before us, winding downward like a coiled serpent. The very walls pulsed with a sinister energy, glowing faintly as if veins of molten hatred ran through the rock. Each breath I took felt heavy, tainted, as though the very air carried the groans of the damned. After what felt like an eternity of descending deeper into the abyss, the tunnel opened into a massive clearing. Before us lay a path paved with glowing red bricks, wide enough for many to walk side by side. The bricks crackled beneath our feet, pulsing with heat like embers of a living fire. This path led to a bridge suspended above what could only be described as the lake of fire. The lake roared. Flames surged in waves like a living ocean, Each crest of fire illuminated the sky above a sickly canopy of crimson, pink and otherworldly hues that no human eye had ever seen. The sky seemed to breathe, pulsing with malevolence, and beneath that unnatural sky, within that sea of flame, were souls, countless multitudes, twisting, thrashing, screaming. Men and women, young and old, faces of every race and language. They writhed as though every nerve in their bodies was aflame. But their suffering went beyond physical torment. They cursed, not just in frustration but in venom. They blasphemed the name of God, of Jesus Christ, of the angels in heaven. They even cursed Satan himself. Their words formed a chorus of bitterness and madness. And yet Sister Lourdes and I understood every word, from ancient Latin to forgotten tribal dialects, from English to German to Aramaic. We comprehended it all, not by intellect but by divine impartation. Just as the apostles at Pentecost were given the tongues of nations, we too were given ears to hear the language of anguish. God forgive them, Sister Lourdes whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her voice cracked with sorrow. They will not stop, the angel said quietly beside us. Even here, many continue to reject the truth. As we walked along the path, approaching the bridge that stretched across the lake of fire, I noticed the deeper horrors awaiting within the flames. Black worms, thick as fingers and slick with decay, slithered across the skin of the condemned, burrowing into their eyes, their mouths, their open wounds. Some would erupt from nostrils or tear through flesh only to crawl back in again. Each soul was devoured and reformed, only to suffer again. Overhead, monstrous vultures larger than any earthly bird circled with wings like smoldering tarps. Their eyes glowed like coals, and their talons dripped with molten metal. They dove suddenly, mercilessly, plucking off limbs and feasting mid-flight. Screams followed every strike. Some victims, in their desperation, hurled themselves deeper into the flames, but even that offered no relief. They simply vanished into the inferno, swallowed whole by the lake. I stumbled, overwhelmed by nausea. How can such horror endure? I asked, choking back tears. This is the wage of sin, the angel replied, his tone unflinching. And your witness will call others to repentance, if they choose to hear. We pressed on, the bridge now beneath our feet. The wind was dry and sharp, carrying ash and the smell of scorched flesh. Beneath us the lake churned, and we saw movement. A serpent. A serpent. Massive, its scales shimmered like molten steel. Its eyes burned with an intelligence both ancient and malevolent. It glided through the lake, its body trailing flame as if it were one with the fire itself. And then it struck. Souls scattered in a frenzy, climbing over one another in fear. But the serpent moved with impossible speed. Its jaws opened wide, and with a single strike it severed several heads. But those heads did not die. They remained alive, blinking, twisting, and screaming as they dangled from the beast's maw. The serpent swam on, its grotesque cargo swaying, and I felt the full weight of despair press into my chest. I clutched the angel's robe and fell to my knees. Lord, Lord, help us. The angel turned, his face grave, and said, This is but the prelude. What lies ahead will demand even greater strength. Prepare your hearts. With that, we crossed to the end of the bridge. The screams of the condemned thundered in our ears, and the air burned with every breath. The ground beyond was cracked and blackened, glowing with heat from beneath. We had reached only the beginning of hell, and it was already more than I could bear. A chilling, high-pitched wail, one that pierced the air with the anguish of a mother torn forever from her child, rose above the rest of the torments and pulled us forward like a sorrowful beacon. The ground beneath our feet turned darker and slicker with every step, soaked not just in ash but in thick, coagulated blood that glistened under the fiery sky like a mockery of life. The stench here was unbearable, a pungent mix of scorched iron, decaying flesh, and something deeply unnatural, like the scent of a womb violently ripped apart. As we moved into a vast and barren plain, we were met with the sight of countless women strewn across the scorched earth, their forms twisted and broken, each one trapped in the agonizing throes of an eternal punishment that seemed to consume not just their flesh, but their very memory of peace. Their tormentors towered over them, black-skinned demons with jagged horns, their bodies rough like obsidian, and their claws glinting with wet, crimson gore. These creatures did not lash out blindly but worked with cruel precision, plunging their claws deep into the abdomens of the women and pulling forth grotesque clusters of tissue that still pulsed with life. Each mass was infested with serpentine worms, some black, some red, others sickly yellow, each writhing like veins with fangs, as if feeding not just on the flesh but on the phlegm of the children these women had carried. The pain of their victims was unspeakable, and their cries formed a terrible music, high, guttural, unending, a symphony of regret, judgment, and grief that hung in the sulphurous air like a shroud of guilt too thick to escape. As the women convulsed in agony, their bodies pinned to the ground by invisible forces, waves of new torment emerged from the shadows, famished demons with skeletal frames and glowing, lidless eyes. These ghoulish beings pounced like vultures upon the discarded organs and mangled remains, their mouths foaming as they tore into the still living flesh with gnashing teeth and splintered bone fingers. Their shrieks echoed across the plain as they fought among themselves, devouring with no sense of purpose other than hunger, gnawing through sinew and devouring worms, as if competing for the darkest prize. And then, in a dreadful crescendo, came the dogs of hell, massive, mangy beasts with blazing eyes and fangs curved like scimitars, lunging into the fray and sinking their jaws into the writhing heaps of tissue, stealing from the demons as chaos erupted around the broken bodies of the damned. The clash between the demons and the hellhounds was savage and primal, a storm of roars and howls and screeches so loud it seemed to split the very stone beneath our feet. Each demon fought desperately to reclaim its share, slashing at the dogs with their bladed claws, sparks flying as talon met flesh and fang met bone. The air became a blur of blood and fire. As the remains of the women, those very pieces ripped from their bodies, were turned into currency in a grotesque war between predators. And still, the women remained conscious, their hollow eyes wide in horror, as they were forced to watch the desecration of their own bodies by beasts that knew no pity, no fatigue, only insatiable appetite and cruel delight. No moment of stillness ever came. As soon as the gory scraps were consumed, the black demons returned to their prey, carving through the skin that had barely begun to reform, slicing into bellies and wombs with renewed vigor, each incision accompanied by a fresh eruption of shrieks and geysers of blood. The worms multiplied with each passing minute, emerging not just from wounds but from the orifices of the face, crawling through eye sockets, nostrils, and mouths, wrapping themselves around tongues and burrowing into throats as the victims thrashed in vain. The air was so thick with stench and the sound of carnage that it seemed to press down on our chests, making each breath a labor, each moment a test of spiritual endurance. I watched as a young woman, her once golden hair now clumped with blood, opened her mouth to scream and instead vomited a writhing knot of worms, her eyes begging for an end that would never come. The carnage continued, a never-ending cycle of mutilation, devouring and regrowth, as if the realm itself fed off the repetition of their punishment. No matter how many times they were torn apart, their bodies reformed just enough to suffer again, their souls held in place by invisible chains woven from guilt, secrecy, and silence. The demons were tireless, and the hell dogs never lost their ferocity, while the skeletal scavengers hissed and fought among themselves like shadows animated by rage. In this place, even the damned were preyed upon, and their agony served as entertainment and sustenance for the kingdom of darkness, each moment a new echo of the choice they had made, and the life they had once carried. We stood frozen in horror, unable to speak, and even Sister Lourdes, so strong in prayer, could do nothing but clutch my arm, her sobs muffled by her trembling hands. The angel who guided us remained silent for a long while, his face grim and unmoving, until finally he pointed toward a fog-covered marsh in the distance. Though his words were soft, they carried the weight of thunder in my soul. This was not the end, but a beginning. What we had seen here was but one part of a punishment built not from rage, but from justice, and the burden of sharing it with the living would now rest on us. As we turned to leave that blood-soaked field, the cries of the women trailed behind us like invisible chains, tethering our hearts to the memory of their suffering so that we would never forget and never remain silent. As we continued our journey through the terrors of hell, beheld a sight that struck us with disbelief: a McDonald's restaurant, its golden arches gleaming amidst the fiery desolation. The building stood like a cruel mockery, its glass windows sparkling under a crimson sky, with neon signs flashing advertisements for ice-cold Coca-Cola and crispy French fries. The air carried the tantalizing aroma of burgers and fried chicken, a siren call that pierced the hearts of the damned. From a distance, we saw 3 massive cages, their iron bars glowing red-hot, imprisoning countless obese souls who stared at the restaurant with ravenous eyes, their faces contorted with insatiable hunger. The angel, our guide, spoke solemnly. This place was crafted by Satan's minions to ensnare souls through gluttony, luring them away from God's grace with the promise of endless feasts. We drew closer, and the illusion of the restaurant grew more vivid. Its parking lot, though empty of cars, shimmered as if freshly washed by rain, surrounded by gardens of unnatural flowers that pulsed with eerie colors. Inside, the air was cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of hell, and the scent of food grew overpowering, stirring a primal urge even in us. The angel warned, "Look, but do not be deceived, for this is a trap of the enemy." Suddenly we saw hundreds of souls, their bodies scarred from torment, rushing toward the restaurant under a torrential downpour of fiery rain. They were invited to eat for free, their eyes gleaming with desperation as they pushed through glass doors, trampling one another in their frenzy. My heart sank, for I knew this false haven would only deepen their suffering, and I whispered a prayer for their lost souls. Inside, the scene was a grotesque parody of earthly joy. The damned sat at tables, gorging on piles of chicken nuggets, hamburgers dripping with sauce, and frosty milkshakes, their laughter echoing as they drank Coca-Cola that sparkled like liquid diamonds. Music blared, songs of Celia Cruz and Michael Jackson filling the air with a false sense of celebration, and the souls danced, their burns and wounds momentarily forgotten. But then, a thunderous roar shattered the illusion. The food on their plates turned to glowing coals, the drinks boiled into molten lava, and the diners' screams pierced my soul. Their bellies swelled grotesquely, then burst open, spilling worms and ash as demons laughed maniacally. The angel said, "These souls chose gluttony over God, and now they are forced to consume their own destruction forever." Tears welled in my eyes as I witnessed their endless torment, a cycle of craving and agony that would never cease. The demons, now revealed in their true, hideous forms, seized the gluttons, pinning them to the scorching floor. With cruel precision, they poured vats of bubbling lava into their gaping mouths, forcing the damned to swallow until their bodies exploded again and again. The air was thick with the stench of burning flesh and the wails of the condemned, who begged for mercy that would never come. Sister Lourdes clutched my arm, her face pale with horror, and I felt my knees weaken at the sight of such relentless suffering. The restaurant, once a beacon of false hope, now stood as a monument to Satan's deception, its walls ablaze with unholy fire. The angel's voice cut through the chaos. "Let this be a warning to all who live for the flesh, for their end is eternal torment." My heart pounded as we turned away, the screams of the gluttons echoing in my mind, a haunting reminder of the cost of surrendering to temptation. Our journey led us to a place of unimaginable cruelty, a region in hell reserved for those condemned for homosexuality, where the air was thick with the stench of sulfur and the screams of the damned. We stood trembling as we beheld the horrors before us. The ground was a sea of molten lava, bubbling and hissing, while jagged rocks glowed red-hot under a sky that pulsed with sickly pink and green hues. Demons, their eyes gleaming with malice, wielded swords of fire, plunging them into the rectums of the condemned, who writhed in agony, their cries echoing like a chorus of despair. The angel, his face grave, said, "These souls rejected God's design, and now they endure the consequences of their rebellion, forever trapped in this cycle of pain." My heart raced, and I clasped my hands in prayer, pleading for strength to witness such atrocities. The torment was relentless. Demons hacked at the bodies of the damned, severing torsos and limbs with blazing blades, ordering them to crawl through the fire to retrieve their severed legs. The condemned, their flesh charred and oozing, dragged themselves across the burning ground, only to fall into hidden pits of lava, where they burned anew. Others faced packs of hell's dogs, monstrous beasts with dripping fangs and eyes like coals, who tore into their flesh, ripping away arms and legs. The dog's urine, acidic and corrosive, sprayed onto the souls, raising blisters that burst with sickening pops, and the victim's screams grew hoarse yet never ceased. Sister Lourdes wept, her voice barely a whisper as she prayed, "Lord, have mercy." But the angel reminded us, "This is justice, for they chose their path." I felt a chill despite the heat, my soul heavy with the weight of their suffering. The cruelty was compounded by deception. Some souls, believing they neared their lost limbs, crawled toward flickering flames that promised relief, only to be ambushed by demons hiding in the shadows. These fiends poured vats of molten lava over the crawling souls, reducing them to charred husks that somehow reintegrated to suffer again. The cycle was unending pain, dismemberment, false hope, and destruction, repeated in a torment that defied human comprehension. I saw a young man, his face twisted in agony, reach for a leg that vanished in a puff of smoke, only to be doused in lava, his screams blending with the cacophony of anguish. My stomach churned, and I turned to the angel, my voice shaking. "How can such suffering endure forever?" He replied, "Their sins bound them to this fate, but your witness may save others." The weight of his words pressed upon me as we moved forward, the horrors of this place etched into my soul. The demons reveled in their sadistic work, their laughter a grating mockery that drowned out the pleas of the condemned. One demon, towering and grotesque, used a whip of fire to lash a group of souls, forcing them to crawl faster toward their doom. Another sprayed acidic urine from its gaping maw, delighting as the liquid melted flesh and bone. The dogs, relentless, prowled in packs, their howls chilling my blood as they pounced on stragglers, tearing them apart with savage glee. Sister Lourdes and I clung to each other, our faith tested by the unrelenting brutality. The angel's presence was our only anchor, his light a faint beacon in this abyss of abyssiness. As we left this area, the screams followed us, a haunting reminder that for these souls there would be no respite, only eternal torment. Among the tortured souls, a figure stood out, one whose face was known to the world, and my heart froze as I recognized him, Che Guevara, the Argentine revolutionary whose image adorns T-shirts globally. Sister Lourdes and I, Gabriel Mendoza, stared in disbelief as he stood in a tar pit, his once proud features now twisted in agony, his eyes hollow with despair. His body, scarred and burned, bore the marks of relentless torment, yet his presence here, among the homosexuals, confounded us. Sister Lourdes whispered, "Is that truly Che Guevara, the man who fought for revolution?" The angel, his voice heavy with sorrow, confirmed, "Yes, this is he, an Argentine, not a Cuban, and his sins have brought him to this place." My mind reeled, for I had seen his face on banners and posters, a symbol of defiance, now reduced to a wretched soul in hell's grip. The angel revealed a truth that shook us to our core. This man was a closet homosexual, hiding his true self from the world. His hatred for others like him stemmed from betrayal. 3 male lovers in his life, each of whom forsook him, lying with other men, as if with women. He never forgave their treachery, and his heart grew bitter, condemning those who shared his secret. I recalled tales of Che's ruthlessness, his role in sending homosexuals to camps in Cuba, and now understood the irony of his fate. He stood with 2 others, their feet sinking into the boiling tar, as demons assembled a monstrous device, its hoses glinting with malevolent purpose. Sister Lourdes gripped my hand, her voice trembling. How could such a man fall so far? The angel's words echoed in my mind, pride and hidden sin lead to destruction. I felt a pang of pity, mingled with dread, for the torment awaiting him. The demons activated their device, and a torrent of molten lava erupted from the hoses, engulfing Che Guevara and his companions. Their screams were deafening, their bodies melting into a viscous broth, yet their eyes remained conscious, wide with terror, aware of every moment of agony. The lava consumed them, only for their forms to reintegrate, ready to endure the same torture again. I saw Chi's face, once bold and charismatic, now a mask of unending pain, his mouth open in a silent scream as the cycle repeated. My heart ached, for though his sins were grave, the eternity of his suffering was beyond comprehension. The angel said, "His choices on earth bound him to this fate, and his torment grieves the Lord's heart." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the weight of this revelation, praying that others might heed this warning. The scene replayed before us, each cycle more harrowing than the last. Demons mocked Chi, taunting him with memories of his earthly glory, only to douse him in lava once more. His companions, equally tormented, shared his fate, their cries blending into a symphony of despair. Sister Lourdes wept openly, her prayers a desperate plea for mercy, though we knew none would come. I thought of the countless souls who idolized this man, unaware of his secret and his doom. The angel's voice was firm. "Let this be a testimony to the living, that no one is above God's judgment." As we turned away, Chi's anguished face lingered in my mind, a stark reminder that fame and rebellion cannot shield one from the consequences of sin. Our path through hell brought us to a scene of brutal retribution, where a white man, once a member of the Ku Klux Klan, lay bound by burning hooks, his body racked with pain. We recognized the marks of his earthly crimes, hatred and murder of black people, now etched into his tormented form. His face, once hardened by prejudice, was now a mask of terror, his eyes pleading for a mercy that would never come. The ground beneath him was a bed of glowing coals, and the air reeked of charred flesh and blood. The angel said, "This man's heart was filled with hate, and his hands stained with innocent blood. Now he reaps what he sowed." My stomach churned as I recalled the atrocities of the clan, and I whispered a prayer for the souls he had harmed. A demon, its body twisted and grotesque, struck the man with a whip of fire, each lash tearing through his flesh, drawing screams that echoed across the fiery plain. With a piercing whistle, the demon summoned a hell dog, a beast with jagged teeth dripping with blood, its eyes glowing like furnaces. The dog lunged, sinking its fangs into the man's thigh, tearing away chunks of flesh as he thrashed helplessly. Then, with a guttural snarl, the beast urinated on him, its acidic urine sizzling as it melted his skin, raising blisters that burst in a spray of pus. Sister Lourdes turned away, her sobs mingling with the man's cries, and I felt bile rise in my throat. The angel's voice was steady. His hatred consumed others in life, now it consumes him in death. I clung to my faith, struggling to endure the horror unfolding before us. The demon's mockery was relentless. One fiend, its voice dripping with scorn, leaned close to the man's face and hissed, "Your pride in your skin was your God, but here it means nothing." Another demon joined in, laughing as it declared, "Your genitals, your symbol of power, are useless in this place." With a swift motion, the hell dog lunged again, its jaws closing around the man's groin, ripping away his flesh in a spray of blood and ash. His screams reached a fever pitch, his body convulsing as the demons roared with laughter, rolling on the ground in sadistic glee. I felt a wave of nausea, my heart breaking for the depth of his suffering, yet knowing his crimes had led him here. The angel's presence was our only solace, his light a reminder of God's justice amidst this chaos. The torment continued without pause. The demons dragged the man across the coals, his flesh peeling away, only for his body to reform for further torture. Another dog appeared, its claws raking across his chest, leaving trails of molten scars. The acidic urine flowed again, corroding what little remained of his form, and his pleas for death were met with jeers. Death is no escape here. Sister Lourdes and I fell to our knees, our prayers drowned out by the cacophony of cruelty. The angel said, "This is the fate of those who sow division and bloodshed. Let your witness turn hearts to repentance." As we moved on, the man's screams faded, but the image of his torment burned in my mind, a chilling testament to the wages of hatred. After witnessing the brutal torment of the racist on the blood-soaked plain, we pressed forward, our steps heavy through a labyrinth of smoldering lakes that hissed with molten fury. The air, once thick with the stench of charred flesh, grew unexpectedly cool, and a tantalizing scent of fried food drifted toward us, stirring an uneasy longing. Ahead, A McDonald's restaurant emerged from the crimson haze, its golden arches glowing like a beacon under a sky streaked with pink and violet. The building was immaculate, its glass walls catching flickers of distant flames, framed by a barren parking lot that glistened as if washed by a ghostly rain. Beyond the lot, gardens bloomed with unnatural flowers, petals of deep purple, fiery orange, and sickly green swaying in a breeze that carried a deceptive sweetness, masking the sulfur beneath. For a fleeting moment, the vibrant colors and clean air tricked my weary soul into believing we had stumbled upon a haven. Yet the angel's solemn gaze anchored us to our grim purpose, and we approached, my heart pounding with dread. The restaurant's facade's a cruel mockery of earthly solace, its neon signs pulsing with promises of ice-cold Coca-Cola, crispy fries and juicy burgers, their light dancing on the wet stone pavement in hypnotic swirls. Inside, the air was chilled, a jarring shift from the suffocating heat outside, and the aroma of sizzling patties and warm buns enveloped us, teasing a hunger I fought to quell with whispered prayers. The dining area was pristine, with polished tables and chairs arranged in neat rows, bathed in the soft glow of overhead lights that mimicked daylight. Young women in crisp McDonald's uniforms, blonde, brunette, and dark-skinned, stood behind gleaming counters, their smiles bright but hollow, their eyes glinting with an unnatural coldness as they wiped trays and adjusted menus with mechanical precision. A heavy-set woman, her skin slick with sweat, strode across the floor, her voice sharp as she barked orders, her presence commanding the empty space with an unsettling authority. Through the wide windows, a storm gathered, and pink-tinted rain began to fall, its droplets pattering softly, each one hissing faintly as it struck the ground. Sister Lourdes clutched my arm, her face pale, and I murmured, "Lord, protect us," sensing the sinister deception woven into this false sanctuary. As the rain grew heavier, a distant roar swelled, and a horde of souls, men and women, some bloated with obesity, others gaunt and skeletal, surged toward the restaurant, their eyes burning with desperate hunger. Their bodies bore the scars of torment, burns and gashes oozing ash and blood, yet they ran with feverish determination, stumbling over jagged rocks and trampling those who fell in their path. Over 300 strong, they crashed through the glass doors, their footsteps thundering like a stampede, their soaked rags clinging to wounds that pulsed with pain. They swarmed 12 counters, where the uniformed women greeted them with soft, inviting voices, taking orders without asking for payment, their smiles never wavering. The dining area erupted in a chaotic parody of joy, the damned laughing and embracing, their faces alight with ravenous glee as they claimed tables piled high with trays of golden chicken nuggets, towering burgers dripping with sauce, and strawberry milkshakes that shimmered like liquid rubies. My stomach twisted, and Sister Lourdes's eyes brimmed with tears, both of us recoiling at the trap laid before these lost souls. The feast unfolded with savage intensity, the damned tearing into their meals, grease smearing their lips and dripping onto their scarred chins as they guzzled frosty Coca-Cola from oversized cups. Their laughter, raw and frenzied, mingled with the pulsing beats of Celia Cruz's vibrant salsa and Michael Jackson's electric pop, blaring from unseen speakers, urging them into clumsy, ecstatic dances. They swayed and spun, their movements jerky yet feverish, as if the food had erased the memory of their fiery cells, where they had languished in torment. Some bore fresh wounds, their skin blistered and raw, yet their hunger consumed all thought, their eyes gleaming with a gluttonous fervor that reduced them to starving beasts. The heavy-set manager wove through the crowd, her smile broad and worn, her hands gesturing expansively as she urged them to pile their plates higher, her voice laced with a kindness that felt like poison. The angel's voice, heavy with divine truth, pierced the clamor. This restaurant was crafted by Lucifer's minions to sever souls from God's grace through glutton. It stands as a lure, placed near their fiery cells, where they gaze upon it with desperate longing, like starving pigs clawing at fiery bars. My heart ached, and I fell to my knees, praying for the strength to bear witness, the weight of their deception crushing my spirit. The illusion of celebration hung by a thread, thin and fragile like sugar glass stretched over a pit of fire. In a dim corner of the hellish McDonald's, we stood two souls sent to witness what most could not bear to imagine. Without warning, the ground beneath us began to tremble, and a jagged bolt of lightning slashed through the pink-tinged sky, leaving behind a thunderclap that cracked like a divine rebuke. Outside the glass walls, the gentle pink rain turned sickly, its color shifting into a pale, poisonous blue, each droplet releasing an acidic odor that coiled into our nostrils, choking the air with dread. Inside, the atmosphere thickened. The clamor of laughter gave way to a cold, creeping silence that spread like a shadow before a storm. None of the diners seemed to notice. They were too busy savoring their meals, mouths stuffed with glistening burgers, greasy fingers wrapped around soda cups, eyes glazed with the delight of indulgence. But then the food began to change. The soft buns hardened and began to glow, their centers smoldering with ember-like heat. Milkshakes bubbled and steamed, turning into slow, viscous lava. French fries disintegrated into ash mid-bite, igniting tongues and searing throats. Scalding vapor hissed from boiling Coca-Cola, misting faces now frozen in confusion and rising fear. The moment of realization dawned in silence, followed by a wave of chaos. Diners froze mid-bite, eyes wide with terror as their feast transformed into their punishment. Some clutched their throats, blistering skin flaking from their hands as lava burned from within. Others tried to run, but the chairs toppled, tables overturned, and their feet found no path of escape. The glass doors they once entered so eagerly had sealed shut, now glowing with heat that blistered the palms of those who dared touch them. Behind the counters, the smiling attendants began to change. Their cheerful expressions twisted into grimaces of hate, and their skin peeled away like fabric, revealing hulking demons with cracked gray flesh and molten eyes. Their fingers grew into curved talons, and they raised blazing swords and shrieking spears, their voices merging into a demonic chant that mocked any memory of peace. At the center of it all, the figure of the heavyset manager began to contort, her flesh bubbling and stretching until it collapsed inward and reformed into something far more dreadful. There stood Satan himself, monstrous and grinning, towering over the ruined dining hall, his eyes glowing with the hunger of ancient malice. With every step he took, the ground scorched and smoked beneath him. He raised his arms, casting shadows that swallowed light itself. His demons encircled him, their weapons raised in sick reverence, and their voices formed a grotesque hymn as they hailed their master. The damned, too late to flee, fell to their knees or curled beneath the tables, trying to hide from the inevitable. Then came his voice, deep, booming and sharp like iron dragged across bone. I am Satan. The feast has only begun. You came to eat, and eat you shall. I provide for you. The demons howled in unison, echoing, all glory and praise to those who eat. And in that instant, the souls understood the trap. Their screams became a symphony of regret and fear, reverberating through the burning walls like the wails of a funeral dirge for the spiritually blind. The structure around us began to crumble under the weight of revelation. Polished floors cracked open, spilling molten slag across the room. Tables and booths warped into jagged slabs of smoldering rock, scorching the flesh of those who still clung to them. The cool, conditioned air gave way to suffocating heat, thick with the scent of sulfur and incinerated meat. Demons moved swiftly between the shrieking victims, slashing at crawling bodies with searing blades, driving spears into those who attempted to escape the corners. The blood that flowed now sizzled upon contact with the stone, mixing with the lava that poured from split bellies. Bloating from their cursed feast, some souls grasped their distended abdomens, their fingers digging into burning skin until their stomachs ruptured violently, spraying ash, worms and bile. Others clawed blindly through the chaos, their eyes already seared from scalding vapor, their mouths still open in silent screams. The music had long faded, replaced by the cracking of bones and the hissing of molten drinks. Every echo in this place whispered the same truth. What was once craved had now become the instrument of eternal torment. I could no longer bear the weight of what I saw. Falling to my knees on the blistering floor, I pressed my palms together in desperation, crying out, Lord, let this vision save others. My voice trembled, barely rising above the wails that filled every corner of that infernal restaurant. Sister Lourdes remained by my side, her tears flowing freely, her own prayer barely audible, as she stared through the smoke and flames. Beside us, the angel did not speak. His face, once serene, was now marked with sorrow, his eyes reflecting the full agony of what we had been sent to see. He stood firm, a silent sentinel among writhing bodies and laughing demons, his light flickering against the heat, but never fading. And though we knew we were only witnessing the beginning, the weight of this single chapter in hell pressed into our souls with unbearable force, burning a warning not just into memory, but into the very calling that had brought us here. The scorched ruins of hell's McDonald's faded behind us, swallowed by the heavy mist of molten air still hissing in our ears. Our guide, the angel of the Lord, walked silently before us, his radiant form casting a pale light across a path that now stretched into a new region, one absent of the flames, stench, and creatures we had endured before. Instead, the ground here was cracked like glass beneath our feet, and the darkness hung thick as oil, pressing on our chests with invisible hands. A cold wind, unnatural, cruel, cut through our bones as we stepped into this new chamber of judgment. Without warning, a solemn whisper parted the stillness. "This is where those who spoke in my name but never knew me now dwell," the angel said. His voice carried no wrath, only grief, like a shepherd mourning the loss of trusted stewards who had betrayed the fold. Before us unfolded rows upon rows of towering glass chambers, each one frosted from within, their surfaces etched with unholy stillness. These were not dungeons of fire, but prisons of divine exposure. There was no screaming here, not in the way we had heard before. Instead, an agony deeper than flame filled the air, an agony of unveiled truth. Inside each chamber sat a solitary soul, wrapped in tattered white garments, robes that once resembled those of shepherds, ministers, and teachers of the word, now faded and mocked by grime and tears. Their faces had twisted into grotesque parodies of themselves, as though the masks they wore in life had melted in death, revealing the true nature beneath. Each chamber contained a mirror taller than the soul who occupied it, impossible to look away from. And these were no ordinary reflections. The mirrors replayed in brutal clarity the secret moments of their lives, sermons laced with hidden arrogance, manipulations of scripture to serve ego and empire, offerings collected not for the poor, but for mansions and indulgence. One man, gaunt and trembling, beat his fists against the glass and screamed, "Did I not cast out demons in your name?" His voice, hoarse and desperate, vanished into silence. Another, a woman, once hailed as a prophetess, sobbed as her best-selling books were shown for what they were, empty promises crafted to feed her pride. No fire consumed them here. No beast tore their flesh. But their torment was no less horrifying, for what they faced was not external. It was themselves. Above each chamber, engraved into the crystal like a final verdict, glowed a plaque that read, "You have received your reward." The meaning struck deeper than any lash of flame. All the applause, the platform, the donations, the fame they had already claimed their prize on earth. And now, stripped of their illusions, nothing remained but regret. Some clawed at their mirrors, nails scraping with futility, their sobs echoing hollow in the frozen space. Others sat paralyzed, unable to look away, forced to relive each compromise, each lie, each time they spoke of holiness, while their hearts served self. We walked between the chambers, guided only by the faint glow of the angel's presence. He said nothing more, but each step revealed new faces, new betrayals. A former bishop watched himself dismiss the sins of the powerful while condemning the weak. A famous televangelist stared blankly as scenes flashed of him asking widows for donations to fund personal luxuries. Their mouths trembled, but no defense came. There were no demons here, only truth. The kind of truth that judges without lifting a finger. The weight of the air grew heavier the deeper we went. I felt the icy judgment seep into my own thoughts, forcing me to examine every sermon I had ever preached, every time I accepted praise, every moment I sought results over obedience. Beside me, Lourdes murmured prayers through clenched teeth, her tears silent, her shoulders tight with reverence and fear. I lowered my head and whispered the words of Matthew 7:22-23. Many will say to me on that day, "Lord, Lord," but I will say, "I never knew you." It was not condemnation I felt, it was conviction. At the end of the final row, The angel paused. No words were needed. We stood still, hearts pierced by the most terrible revelation of all, that there are pulpits still full of men and women who, even now, walk this very path unknowingly. Souls who preach and sing, but never surrender. Churches that clap for men, not for Christ. Ministries built as kingdoms for man's glory. And this place is where that road ends. As we turned to leave, the silence pressed against our backs. The faces behind the glass stared through us, or perhaps through themselves. They were not lashed or burned, but they were undone by the full knowledge of who they truly were. Their punishment was truth without the veil, final, undeniable, eternal. The angel's voice, as we stepped beyond the chambers, was almost a whisper. There was an, "But your testimony, if spoken in truth, can still lead others to repentance." His words fell like a mantle over us, and though we departed that frozen place, its chill never left our bones. The faces of those false servants once celebrated on earth remained etched in our memory as a solemn reminder. Only a heart fully surrendered to Christ will endure in the light of his judgment. The frozen void of the glass chambers gradually dissolved into shadow as we continued our descent through the realms of eternal judgment. The angel walked ahead without a word, his light subdued, no longer cutting through the darkness, but simply marking the way. The coldness we had felt began to change, no longer sharp like ice, but instead heavy, like a leaden presence pressing against our hearts. It was a silence not of peace, but of unbearable delay, of opportunities wasted and obedience denied. We stepped into a vast, featureless plain, a plaza that stretched farther than the eye could see. Its obsidian surface gleamed faintly under a sky utterly void, no stars, no clouds, not even the shimmer of distant flame. The dome above was not dark like night, but hollow like a soul emptied of all hope. Spread across this space were thousands upon thousands of human figures, each standing in perfect circular formations, evenly spaced yet profoundly alone. No chains bound them. No demons tormented them. Yet the agony on their faces was unmistakable anguish born not of violence, but of realization. Their bodies trembled, hands pressed to their chests, as if trying to hold back some invisible force rising from within. Their expressions, some weeping, others staring into space, were marked by one shared emotion: regret. Not mere sadness or grief, but a raw, unbearable regret that had sunk into the core of their being. It was not the regret of the deceived, but of the informed, those who knew the truth and walked away from it. The angel's voice came gently but with piercing clarity, as if spoken both aloud and into the depths of our spirits. "These are those who heard my word, who wept in my house, who saw the signs and warnings, yet never allowed their hearts to change." There was no wrath in his tone, only deep sorrow. I felt my breath catch as I looked into the hollow eyes of the damned, and a whispered plea escaped my lips: "Lord, forgive us for how easily we forget." We approached one woman whose hair hung in tangled grey knots, her body trembling, lips moving in a broken chant. As we neared, her voice grew clearer. She was recounting a sermon from 2009, a fiery message that stirred her heart to tears. That night, she had vowed to change. But the next morning she returned to her usual life: bitterness, gossip, harshness unchanged. "I never truly repented," she murmured, clutching her chest. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw not defiance, but the unbearable weight of a moment forever lost. Near her stood a young man, perhaps in his 20s, rage and grief twisting his features. His fists pounded against his ribs as he cried out, "I shared scripture on social media. I made posts to look holy, but I didn't love God. I just didn't want to go to hell." His voice rose until it cracked, yet no one around him responded. Each soul remained imprisoned in their own regret, unable to hear or comfort the others. Their torment wasn't physical, it was internal, cyclical, and utterly isolating. Everywhere we turned were stories like these, stories of near repentance, of partial surrender, of truth heard but never obeyed. A former church usher stared blankly at the sky, muttering about a YouTube video he had once watched, a warning he dismissed with a laugh before drowning himself in alcohol. A woman wrung her hands, recalling how she once danced in a revival meeting, only to go home and curse her husband in rage. Their words repeated endlessly, like a needle stuck in the same groove, each confession a spiritual whip they used against themselves. Even more tragic was the absence of visible tormentors. No beasts, no chains, no flames, and yet I realized their suffering was among the most unbearable of all. Here they were their own executioners, haunted not by what had been done to them, but by what they had failed to do. I saw a teenager, pale and weeping, whispering about a youth camp where he had once felt the Holy Spirit, but chose instead the approval of his friends. Now his eyes were dark hollows, fixed on a future he would never touch. The angel remained silent for a time, allowing the weight of what we saw to settle over us. Then, as if tearing the silence in two, he spoke the words of James 4:17. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. The verse rang through the plaza with divine weight. To hear and not obey, the angel continued, is a sin more grave than ignorance, for it is not darkness that damns them, but the light they refused. Some souls dropped to their knees, not in reverence but in torment, their faces contorted in silent cries as they faced the eternal void they had carved with their own choices. The silence of the ground around them remained unchanged, its cold black surface offering no comfort, no shift, no mercy. They had heard the truth. They had even wept at it, but they had not obeyed it. And now in this place time no longer offered second chances. We stood still, overwhelmed. Lourdes whispered a prayer so soft it sounded like a breath, interceding for the countless living who still had time. I joined her, my voice breaking under the weight of what we had seen. My thoughts turned to the sermons preached each Sunday, the revival calls gone unanswered, the videos shared but never acted upon. How many, I wondered, would one day stand in this very circle? The angel's voice returned, this time bearing both urgency and command. Your testimony can awaken hearts still beating. Speak it before it is too late. The words struck like thunder, and I knew this was not merely a vision, it was a commission. As we turned to leave, the plaza seemed to stretch behind us like a sea of mourning. The souls remained frozen, their silence louder than screams, their regret woven into the very fabric of that empty sky. In the distance, the faint red haze of hell's McDonald's glowed like a malignant reminder of where easy indulgence leads. I prayed aloud, Lord, let our words be sharper than silence, and Lourdes echoed, let someone turn back. The angel led us on, but the faces, the stories, the confessions, they followed. And with every step, we knew this chapter was not the end. It was a message waiting to be delivered. The suffocating heat from the infernal McDonald's had not subsided. If anything, it deepened, thickening into a haze of sulfur and scorched flesh that clung to our skin like a curse. The molten walls, once flickering with deception, now wept rivers of glowing slag as Satan's laughter dimmed into a dreadful hum, like a storm gathering in the bones of the earth. In the eerie silence that followed, a swarm of demons surged forward, grey-skinned giants with eyes like scorched iron and claws curved like sickles descending upon the tormented with unrelenting force. Each soul who had feasted on deception was seized, pinned to the blistering floor by clawed hands that burned flesh without mercy. Their shrieks tore through the air as a third demon appeared, gaunt and skeletal, cradling large vats once filled with icy Coca-Cola. The contents had transformed into boiling lava, hissing with malevolent heat. With disturbing precision, the demons forced open the mouths of the damned, their claws shredding lips and gums. The molten liquid was poured down their throats, scorching their insides until their bellies grotesquely swelled and finally burst an eruption of blood, fire, and ash that soaked the already glowing floor. The cycle did not end there. Even as their bodies collapsed, their forms reassembled through a horrifying supernatural process, only to endure the torment again. Cries of agony echoed beneath the whipcracks of skeletal demons, who circled the victims like hyenas. These gaunt tormentors shouted, they came to eat, so they will eat until they burst. Their fire-laced whips tore open flesh, sizzling with every strike. The repetition of pain was relentless, and each scream seemed louder than the last, as if echoing from a place deeper than the body, perhaps the soul itself. From the mass of broken bodies emerged a new horror. A contingent of demons armed with spears marched through the carnage. The tips of their weapons burned with unholy fire, and their eyes gleamed with perverse delight. They moved methodically, singling out those who in life had engaged in homosexual sin, With ruthless efficiency, they raised their weapons and in one brutal motion drove the spears into the genitals of their victims, both men and women, ripping through soft tissue with an explosion of blood and ash. The pain was beyond human comprehension, and the screams were not merely cries, they were the raw sound of hope being extinguished. Suddenly, the walls of the McDonald's split open, and a pack of monstrous hounds burst through the side entrance. Their fur was soaked with oil, their teeth jagged like rusted saws, and their eyes shone with the madness of hell. They descended upon the mutilated bodies, sinking their fangs into already shredded flesh, tearing what remained with feral glee. The acidic urine of these beasts sprayed across the victims, blistering their skin, leaving burns that oozed that putrid slime. The demons roared with laughter, feeding on the spectacle of pain as the damned flailed helplessly beneath fang and flame. And then, as if to crown this theater of agony, the floor trembled and darkened. Satan rose once more. Towering over the carnage, his presence alone drew every scream into silence. With one clawed hand raised high, he commanded the dogs to scatter and search for other prey, their massive paws burning trails into the ground as they vanished into the shadows. In their place came another breed of monstrosity, grotesque toads the size of men, their slimy skin glistening under the flicker of red light. They lumbered into the chamber, tongues whipping out to capture broken souls, dragging them into open maws where their screams were quickly smothered in foul, wet darkness. Among the chaos, a group of overweight souls, somehow spared from the worst, thus far stood paralyzed in terror. They had been forced to watch it all. Their eyes were wide with horror, their bodies frozen, forbidden to move. One toad, bloated with rage, emitted a guttural croak that echoed off the burning walls. Coleman. It rasped, summoning a force we had not yet seen. From the red mist outside came two towering demons pulling a cart of molten tin, its surface glowing with unbearable heat. Sparks sprayed from its wheels as it carved paths into the scorched floor. The demons wielded whips thicker than a man's arm, snapping through the air with electric fury. They dragged the twisted, lava-covered souls from the floor and hurled them onto the cart's blistering surface. The screams that followed were sharp and unending, a piercing sound that bore into our minds like hot nails. Mercy was a forgotten word in this place. Then, through the haze and blood, a shadowy figure emerged. Coleman. The being was skeletal, its frame supported by two twisted crutches, its flesh a rotting parchment over brittle bone. Flanking him were 6 star-covered hellhounds, their fur pulsing with a strange, celestial light, a terrifying mockery of what was once holy. Coleman did not speak. He simply gestured with one clawed hand, and the hounds moved, herding the gluttons and homosexuals alike toward their final destination. The damned, unable to stand, were dragged like refuse. The red rain had thickened into lava mist, and each drop burned their skin anew. Their screams filled the chamber like thunder, mingling with curses and desperate prayers. Some clawed at the air, others begged to be taken last, but all were gathered, all were bound for the same furnace. As we stood on the edge of this vision, the angel remained still, his light dimmed, his face heavy with grief. Not because justice had failed, no, justice was fulfilled here, but because so many had chosen this path freely, trading divine mercy for pleasure, for pride, for appetite. There were no more words to be said. Only tears remained. And so we turned away, not by choice, but by call. Our journey was not finished, and this vision, etched deep into our souls, was not given for us alone. It was a warning for the living. The searing stench of sulfur clung to every breath as we stood among the ruins of the infernal McDonald's, the last cries of the tormented fading into the molten air. The angel, still glowing with a divine radiance that had not dimmed since the beginning of our descent, turned to us with a gaze filled with sorrow and fire. His voice rose like thunder over the still burning wreckage, quoting from Proverbs 23:2, "Put a knife to your throat if you are given to gluttony." The words sliced through the smoky silence with a clarity that demanded trembling reverence. Then, as though speaking to all of humanity through us, he declared, "Forget McDonald's if you wish to enter the kingdom of heaven. Even a single indulgence, if it draws your heart away from God, is enough to feed Satan's dominion." The angel's voice softened, though it carried no less weight. He revealed a truth that sent chills down our spine. Those souls who had lingered in the restaurant longer, those who weren't immediately devoured or mutilated, were not just gluttons. They were idol worshippers in disguise, souls who had made comfort, taste, pleasure, and the illusion of peace their god. Their fate, he warned, would be even worse than what we had already seen. Not because they ate more, but because they knew more, and still chose the lie. A trembling confession rose in my spirit. Lord, guide the living away from this trap. We were signaled to move on. The angel's hand, raised in silent command, pointed toward a narrow path beyond the scorched tiles. Each step away from that cursed place felt like walking through a furnace. Scalding heat radiated from the floor, the scent of burning tin and flesh never relenting. All around us, a crimson fog descended like a mourning veil. And then, just past the shattered glass entrance, we saw him again, Coleman. His skeletal figure, hunched over ancient crutches, waited like a sentinel in the haze. Beside him stood 6 monstrous hounds, their fur flickering with star-like embers, their eyes glowing with otherworldly judgment. Behind them, the molten cart groaned under the weight of writhing bodies, still sizzling in pain. I felt a hand grasp my arm tightly, not in fear, but in desperate intercession, and together we turned our eyes forward, resisting the instinct to look back. The farther we walked, the more vivid the memory became. The golden arches had not dragged the damned by force. No chains had bound them. It was desire alone that enslaved them, voluntary surrender to the illusion of safety and fulfillment. The angel had shown us their original prison, rows of flaming iron cages, where inmates stared longingly through the bars at the distant glow of the McDonald's. They had cried out for release, not from hell, but to enter the restaurant. They begged their captors to take them there, clawing at the bars not for freedom but for food. Every soul that stepped across that threshold did so willingly, and in doing so they wrote their own sentence. Even now I can still hear them, still see them, still smell the mix of fried temptation and boiling regret. And the worst part was not the lava or the fire or the mutilation, it was the truth. They had chosen it. My knees buckled beneath the weight of that understanding. Lord, I pleaded from my soul, let those who still breathe understand what these souls could not. I have preached the gospel thousands of times in churches and villages throughout South America, but nothing could have prepared me for this. It was no dream. It was not metaphor or allegory. Whether I was taken in the body or spirit, I do not know. But this was real. I saw it. We saw it. 2 witnesses, myself and Lourdes, beholding the same horror at the same time with the same clarity. We saw the face of rebellion. We saw Che Guevara, known around the world as a symbol of revolution, now mutilated beyond recognition, screaming among those condemned for unrepentant sin. We saw idol worshippers gnash their teeth as they swallowed molten lava where they once devoured burgers. We saw gluttony turned into eternal consumption. Their screams were not only from pain, but from realization, because they knew the truth far too late. The angel said little as we continued. He did not need to. Every step through the fading wasteland spoke more loudly than words. The scorched path beneath us, the distant moans behind, and the heavy silence of those still being judged all testified to what would become of the many who heard, but did not heed. Our charge was clear. What we witnessed was not for us alone. This testimony must be spoken, must be shouted, must be believed. The infernal McDonald's stands not only in hell, but its illusion is already among the living. In desires unsubmitted, in pleasures elevated above obedience, in false peace exchanged for eternal ruin. We had seen it, and now we had to tell it. As the angel's light led us into a new corridor of shadows, the mist began to lift. Behind us, the echoes of hell's restaurant still rang. Ahead, the unknown awaited, but our mission was now sealed in blood and fire. We would return, and we would speak. Not everyone would listen, but some would. And perhaps, just perhaps, they would never look at a simple meal the same way again. When we first read the testimony of Pastor Gabriel Mendoza, what haunted our entire team was not just the extreme horrors he witnessed in hell, but the undeniable truthfulness in every detail he described. This is not a symbolic story, nor a metaphor. It is a clear and painful warning, given to the living so they may not suffer the same fate. We understand that some will push back and others may doubt. But if what he saw is true, then our silence today could mean the destruction of souls tomorrow. Temptation in this age does not come in the form of monsters or devils. It comes dressed in things that feel familiar, safe, normal. Yet, as he witnessed firsthand, that very sense of normal may be the threshold to the darkest place imaginable. We are not sharing this story to stir up controversy. We share it because we believe when someone has died, been brought back to life by God, and dares to speak of things no one wants to hear, then it is no longer just their story. It becomes a message for all of humanity. If you've listened this far, we simply ask you to take time to reflect deeply, because life does not merely end when the heart stops beating. Sometimes it begins again in a place no one expects. Before you leave, please take a moment to leave a comment with the word Amen, along with your name and the city you're watching from. We will mention your name in prayer and lift you before the Lord, who knows every heart that is truly listening. If you've supported us through Super Thanks, we are deeply grateful. We firmly believe that God sees your act of faith and He will never forget your devotion. Remember, this is not just supporting a YouTube channel. It is an act of sowing faith into your own life, a small step with great meaning on the journey of walking in God's divine plan for you.